Alright, so like I told you guys, I wanted to put together a series of videos that a little bit more in depth, going over the parts and pieces that I use to assemble the way I like to do a motor on a Perception Pescador 100 or 120 Pro. Not saying it's the right way, not saying it's the best way. It's just the way that I do it. So you guys, take it easy on the comments. I'm not a professional. I do this stuff in my garage. I'm not a professional videographer or a professional YouTuber. I've come up with something that I want to share. If you guys like it, great. Do something with it. If you don't like it, then sorry. I did the best I could do. This video is going to be just about the PWM, kind of how it functions, the wiring that's needed, the little panel that I put together that I use on the Pescador Pros. It's kind of like just basically all built in one. It's meant to go in the kayak like a cartridge, and goes right beside the seat, and you just screw it in. I'm going to give you guys kind of as detailed as I can on the parts. I purchase a lot of things off eBay, so links and things may not be available. You know, if somebody's watching this video a year from now, that auction or that link on eBay is going to be gone. But I will give you as much information as I can. Most of the stuff I get is at Lowe's or Ace Hardware. There's just very few things that I order offline to make it that much easier on you. I'll give you as many parts as I can. But this right here is basically what I need in order to make that panel. So this is a 60 amp PWM. Comes with a variable knob and a reverse switch. That's what it looks like. And then underneath you can see inside where it says motor and power. And that is helpful because I don't speak Chinese. And if you buy one of these, just make sure it's a 60 amp. And if it comes with these options right here, then it's probably the exact same one that I got. I bought 4 or 5 of these from the same people, and they've never given me a problem. I've had one of the knobs get corroded, but you can replace a knob if you have to. This is 3/16 ABS plastic. In the future, I will go to probably 1/8. The 3/16 is kind of thick. It's just what I had laying around, and it worked good, but it is a little bit thicker than I would like. So I would go with 1/8 inch thick ABS plastic. And these are for mounting the panel to the kayak. These are number 10 3/4 inch panhead screws, stainless steel. You can pick those up at Ace. And these are a number 8 with a countersunk head. It's got a little bevel to it, and that's for securing the PWM to the panel. That's what I use on these 3 screws right here. And then this stuff here is just some wire sheathing. It's what I like to protect my wires with while they're in the kayak. It's not necessarily needed, but any little bit of protection helps and doesn't hurt, so that's what I like to use. So those are the main ingredients for that panel, and that's really all you need. I use 6 of the mounting screws and then 3 of the PWM screws. Alright, hope you guys enjoy the rest of the video where I put this thing together. And like and subscribe if you like what you see. Alright, so I just want to show you guys real quick PWM set up on the bench. So I've got my power source, which is my battery. I've got my power cables, which runs to my PWM. PWM only has the 4 connections. So you got the battery going in and the motor coming out. If you look on the very back side, it's all written in Chinese, so that doesn't do you much good. But if you look on the very back of the board, it will actually tell you motor and power. Plus, minus, plus, minus. Motor doesn't really matter, but there's a plus, so I keep it on the plus. It comes with this, which tells you the percentage of power that you're at. It doesn't actually tell you the volts. So you can see it goes up a little bit. This doesn't really do a kayak a whole lot of good. You'd have to have you know, you're not going to look down at this every time to try to figure out what speed you're at. So this I get rid of. And then that just leaves you with basically forward, stop, and reverse switch. And then this is your speed switch. So I'm going to put it in forward, let's say, and then I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm just going to slowly raise it up. All the way to max, and then back down. And if there's a need for it, I could go that slow if I wanted to. And then off. So it's super simple. It will save your battery life, and I mean, there's absolutely no reason not to go this route. You can pick these things up for about 15 bucks. This is a 60 amp hour with a reversible switch. It's made in China. There's not really a part number for it. If you can find one that looks similar to this, you know, has this knob, it has this switch, it's 60 amp hours, then it'll probably work for you. I've used 5 or 6 of these things with not one single issue.
Alright, so how do we mount the PWM reverse switch and throttle control? So as you can see, this right here is the section that goes behind the handle. And what I do is I cut this out. So nice big hole that the PWM will slide into, kind of like a cartridge. I take my ABS and I cut it the size of that hole, round off the corners nice and pretty. And then I mount the PWM to the back of that ABS. I mount our switch in the ABS and our knob in the ABS. So what you're left with is a rectangle ABS with switch, or a knob, switch, and there'll be a couple of screws down here that is the back side of this holding this on. And then I use some foam tape around the edges, and then 6 screws to hold it on. This stuff's easy to work with. I cut the rectangle that I need, round off the edges, and then I use a torch to heat it up and mold it to the contours of the kayak.
Alright, so we measured out our maximum usable size, and we had about 3 inches by 6.5 inches. So I've got my ABS marked off, brand new razor, and the easiest way to do this is using a square just to keep everything nice and straight, and don't apply too much pressure. The more pressure you apply, just the more stuff's going to get out of whack. So if you got a new blade in there, the easiest thing to do is just make more wax at it, but with less pressure, just nice and easy. It'll cut through it, no problem. You don't have to feel like He-Man, like you got to barrel through it in 2 or 3 cuts. Even if it takes 10 cuts, it'll save you some time by not having to remake it. So that's going to be our panel. So the PWM will sit on the back side, mounted, and then we'll have our knob and our switch. I'm going to round these edges off with the bench grinder, and then we'll give it some contour using the little torch. bit, and then I'm just using the edge of my bench. All we gotta do is just get a little bit of a bend. Just so that it won't have that stress. So you can see that, just a little bit of a bend. So it'll fit the inside of the kayak nice and neat, and the screws that are holding this thing on won't have so much stress trying to pull it onto that contour. ABS is easy stuff to work with.
So we're just test fitting the panel that we just cut and molded. So it's going to go just like that. You see how it fits nice and neat. The contours are pretty good. So what I'll do at this point is I will mount the PWM to the back side and the knob and the switch. I will mark the kayak off with some blue tape, and we'll come up with a dimension that we need to cut out to allow clearance for everything. So as you can see, that's our pattern. As long as we don't go bigger than that, we will be good. So usually what I do is I come in about 3/4 of an inch, and then I'll draw out my hole that we're going to cut. And so before we mount anything to this panel, we're going to draw this little cutout first. Once we get the PWM mounted, then we'll take final measurements on what we're going to need, and then we'll lay out the size hole that we need to cut.
Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is take this thing apart. Usually got 2 screws that holds the cover on. This cover just kind of slides into place. So we can lose this for now. And what we're looking at is we want to mount this thing something like that. Give it enough of a lip so that we got something that covers up. We're going to put foam tape around this, and then we also got to make sure that we got enough room for our switch and our knob. So you want to be kind of tight to that line, but not too tight. And with this plastic, it's real easy just to figure out what holes you want to use. And then I'm just going to use something sharp to mark my holes. There's 3 mounting holes on this thing, so I use all 3 of them. So what I end up doing is drilling those 3 holes out, and then run my screws through this side, and it runs them right into those mounting tabs. Don't be too worried about finding screws that match this aluminum, because just about any screw that's close will punch a hole right through it and thread it nicely. So I actually go with the biggest screw that I can find that I can get started in there. So I found the 3 screws that we're going to use for mounting. Like I said, this stuff here is soft, so you don't have to pay too much attention, because it will thread in just fine. And it will probably hold it better than the little screws that were probably intended for these holes. So we're just going to get these ready. And we're going to So there we go. And this will fit right back in here, like such. And then we just gotta cut out a little rectangle for our switch and then drill another hole for our knob. And then we can put the case back on. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys here. This is going to be our switch location. And just to show you, when you're dealing with this ABS, stuff really cuts like butter if you're using a new blade. So I'm just going to start in the corner and push my blade into it. And just work it down in. Work it down and almost to the other side there. And I'm just going to do that in each of the 4 corners. I'm using some really thick ABS. If I were to buy some, I would get stuff that's thinner than this for sure. But this is just what I had, so this is what I'm using. The last thing we got to do this panel is just make our holes for the screws that are going to secure it to the kayak. So I've just got them marked. So just keep in mind, if I end up doing these as kits, then I'm going to supply this whole panel, the whole thing already assembled. So all you'll have to do is run the wires and hook it up and screw it in. The very last thing is we're just going to put some foam tape around the outsides. I've never had any issues with these things. Some people will spray silicone and do all kinds of stuff to seal them up, but I've never had one issue with them. So I believe that foam gives it enough protection from the elements. So we're almost there.
There you have it, guys. That is the finished product. We got our 6 mounting holes. We got our foam all put on, which I actually had to end up super gluing on just to keep it on. That's our wiring. I like using the sheathing just to keep everything nice and protected without having to worry about it in case something rubs up against it and whatnot. But that's the finished product. Go right in the kayak just like that. So there we go, nice and simple.
So I like to start out, want to drill these corners out first. And what that helps with is if you were to cut it straight, you could end up with a crack right there. So I like to put a drill bit in the corners to keep it rounded. And what that rounded part does is keep it from cracking. I like to use a step bit because I can kind of control how big I want that hole just right on the fly. So I'm going to start in the corner. And then I can just take my hole right to the edges where I want it.
And like I've explained in my other videos, all these little shavings, keep them somewhere. Keep them in a bag. They're great for patching holes later on if you have to. So once we get those holes drilled, we're going to come in with a multi-tool and hack these straight lines out real easy. So that's what our PWM panel is going to look like. Next I'll come in and I'll mark my holes and put a little pilot hole in there for our screws. And I like this tool right here for doing that. Alright, so now that I got my first two, I do those two so that nothing moves around when I'm doing these other four. And that's how our panel is mounted. So the next thing I'm going to do is, the reason I start with this is now I've got an access point, so I'm going to remove this and then we're going to run our battery cable to the front and start working on our foot control. Alright guys, so that concludes that video. That was our PWM testing, assembly, and installation into the kayak. The next video I'm going to cover running the battery cable, and we're going to start on our foot peg controls by getting our hoses to the back. That's going to carry our cables eventually whenever we get those installed. I appreciate the positive comments. If you guys want to leave me some comments, let me know what you think. If you guys any tips for me, but I try to answer all the questions that you guys post. Try to be as helpful as I can. Please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next video.